Wow. I think that's the best welcome I've had in all the time I've gone around speaking, not only in Janesville, but around this state. So thank you very much. And I hope I earned that in the course of this conversation we're going to have over the next half hour or so. I'm going to talk and then take questions. And if I'm not speaking loudly enough, please raise your hand or just blurt it out and tell me to speak more loudly. First of all, I want to congratulate everyone who was at the vigil and congratulate people who are doing the march. It's really important that we get out in the street and tell our neighbors and our friends that we care about the earth and that we care about science and that we care about reason. Part of me thinks that we are now entering the dusk of the age of enlightenment, that actually reason and logic and facts don't matter anymore to people. And one side has facts and the other side has, as Kellyanne Conway put it, alternative facts. And so this is quite alarming. And we need to combat that. And so I'm encouraged by the rallies today, the rallies in Washington. I've looked online and seen some of the great signs that are out there. There was one with Donald Trump with a golf club in his hand, someone dressed up as Trump, and he's about to swing and hit the ball, and the ball is a globe. So I thought that was a very appropriate metaphor, and we need to stop Donald Trump in his backswing and not let him destroy this earth here. I also was at Democracy Now!'s website on Thursday or Friday, listening to Amy Goodman or reading Amy Goodman's interview with Bill McKibben. And Bill McKibben had a great line. He said, "Weekends are made for fighting tyranny." And for fighting insanity, I might add. So we need to fight tyranny and insanity and destructiveness. I want to thank the Rock Valley Fellowship of Reconciliation. I've spoken to you many times before on peace and war issues, and the Rock County Progressive Democrats. I go around the state and speak to a lot of chapters of county Democrats, League of Women Voters. The interesting thing, once you get outside of Madison and Milwaukee, maybe, that sometimes the people who are really holding down the fort are the people in the local county chapters of the Democrats, and even more so the League of Women Voters chapters around this state. I've gotten to know a lot of the women activists who are really doing incredible work. I was just up in Ashland and Washburn, and there's a tremendous chapter up there. I got to speak to some of the students at Northland College, and that was exciting as well, because we need to reproduce ourselves. I think that's a real important issue for the progressive community here in Wisconsin and probably around the country. But we need to get another generation or two behind us who are going to carry the baton, carry the torch for us. And I'm happy to say that there are a lot of people behind us here in Wisconsin. I've joined the board of Wisconsin Voices, which is an umbrella organization down in Milwaukee, and it has a lot of our nonprofit groups together. A lot of times people bemoan the fact or the allegation, the suggestion that there's a lack of unity here on the progressive side in Wisconsin, that every organization is in its own silos, that you've got the civil libertarians here and the peace activists here and the environmentalists here and the labor activists here and the civil rights people here. I don't think that's true anymore here in Wisconsin. One bit of good news to report to you is that we are knocking down those silos. We're shelving our egos, and we are all working together. And Wisconsin Voices is one of the organizations that does that. And we at the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign is thrilled to be a part of that coalition. We are working hand in glove as never before with groups right in the bullseye of our work, like the League of Women Voters or Common Cause of Wisconsin and Citizen Action and WISPERG and a lot of these other good groups. So there are just tremendous people in this nonprofit sector, and a lot of them don't have the gray hair that I got. So that's a hopeful thing. You know, in Madison, we always think we're ahead of the game. So we had our Science March last Saturday. And there were some of the same signs that I see that you all were carrying today. There is no Planet B. It was a very popular sign. There was a sign and a chant, science, not silence, science, not silence, which I thought was good. There was another sign I took a picture of with my phone, the oceans are rising and so are we. I thought that was kind of inspiring. There were some pointed ones, of course, at our president here was one. There's no cure yet for small hand disease, but if there is, scientists will find it. And then here was another one. I trust science-based decisions because my gut only knows, and then it was S blank, blank, blank. Because Trump talks about his gut. You know, George W. Bush did the same thing. You know, I've got a great gut. I rule by my gut. And, you know, talk about not believing in science or reason or rational thought. If they're just going to go by their gut, it's a little bit of a risky guide. But before I really get to Trump and dive in about what Trump's doing, I do want to talk about our governor, Scott Walker. And I wish your native son, Tim Cullen, had decided to run against Scott Walker. I thought Tim Cullen would have been a good candidate. I've gotten to know Tim Cullen a little bit over the last couple of years. I helped him with his book, Ringside Seat, which is a great book about Wisconsin politics. And Tim's got his heart in the right place on a whole range of issues, from labor issues to the environment to public schools and civil rights. So it's too bad that he's not doing that. You know, when he dropped out of the race or said he wasn't going to run, I sent him a message saying, why don't you run against Paul Ryan then? But he didn't return that message, but it's an idea. And I do think there's a special place in hell for Paul Ryan, because people who know better but still ally themselves with people who are doing really evil things, I mean, how can you stand up and say what Donald Trump has said is the textbook definition of racism and then still endorse the guy? How can you act appalled at what Donald Trump was doing when he was bragging about sexually assaulting women and then still endorse and work with this man? There is something very, very morally wrong about someone who can do that simultaneously. So I'll get back to Walker, though, because Walker is half of our problem here in Wisconsin. And, you know, after coming from the progressive to the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, somehow it's re-energized me. I think this focus on the local, the focus on what's going on here in Wisconsin and how we can you know, maybe come to grips with this has really gotten me going again. Because at the progressive, I was dealing with national, international war and peace issues that I enjoyed writing about and talking about, but I couldn't really solve right away. I mean, the joke always was, you know, and the joke of the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign is, you know, have you solved that problem yet? So it's still an intractable problem, but it's more at the level of a workable size. It's like the old folk singer Pete Seeger, who after a while just started to work primarily on the river in the Hudson Valley where he lived, and got re-energized doing that. So I'm re-energized over at the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, but we have this problem with Scott Walker, and it's not just Scott Walker, it's Scott Fitzgerald, it's Speaker Voss, it's Leah Vukmir, it's the people from the American Legislative Exchange Council, this right-wing gathering of corporate officials and conservative legislators that come up with so-called model bills around the country and then take them back to their state capitals, and where they dominate the state capitals, they just ram them through. And that's what we've seen here, of course, since 2010. And Walker himself is, you know, the guy is slippery, more slippery than a lemon seed. I make pies, and you know, I squeeze a little lemon in the pie, and then the lemon seed gets in there, and I got to fish it out, and that's a hard thing to do. He is that slippery. So in his latest budget, what has he done? He's moved to the middle on some issues. He's giving more money to the public schools now. He's giving money to the homeless. You know, he's kind of like the arsonist who sets things ablaze at night and then in the morning puts on his firefighter outfit and acts the hero. I don't think he should be applauded for that. But actually, there's one issue he hasn't moved at all on, and that is the environment. He's still got his matches and his gasoline out for the environment. He's still a climate change denier and an ignoramus when it comes to the environment. Check out this statement from Walker in 2015. His spokesman said, Governor Walker believes facts have shown that there has not been any measurable warming in the last 15 or 20 years. Facts have shown. I mean, talk about alternative facts. I mean, when we've had one record-breaking year after another, and you know, 12 of the warmest years on record, or 12 of the 14 warmest years on record, whatever it is, for him to say there hasn't been any measurable warming is just baffling, really baffling. and disturbing. But it's not only what he thinks, it's what he does that's so disturbing. And so his Department of Natural Resources, the DNR, has actually scrubbed the words climate change from its website. The great investigative reporter James Rowan, who used to be at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel and used to be an aide at the mayor's office in Milwaukee and Mayor Soglein's office in Madison, and prior to that, during the 60s, was an editor at the Daily Cardinal. And is now a blogger. He's the one who discovered this, and I told him he should get a Pulitzer Prize for it, and he laughed. His dad may have been a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist at the Washington Post, Hobart Rowan. And so Jim Rowan just on his own found this out about the DNR's website. They just, over the last 6 months, took the words climate change straight off their website. Unbelievable. And he acts like we have forever on this planet. Walker does, as does Trump, of course. Walker blocked high-speed rail right out of the gate, as you'll remember, as soon as he came in. He's blocked the expansion of wind power every step of the way since getting into power. He's eliminated 200 positions at the DNR, including lots and lots of scientists. He and the DNR and his Justice Department are not prosecuting polluters. Prosecution of polluters is at a 35-year low right now in Wisconsin. And of course, he's pushing these factory farms, these CAFOs, with their high-capacity wells. Now, I don't like to use the expression high-capacity wells because it doesn't really describe what's going on out there. A so-called high-capacity well is a well that sucks out of the ground every day, at a minimum, 100,000 gallons of water. 100,000 gallons of water a day coming out of our ground from these factory farms. Now, the Wisconsin State Journal reporter Steve Verberg just in the last 2 weeks came out with a story that said Walker, since October alone, and his DNR have approved high-capacity well permits that are sucking 1 billion gallons a month out of our water supply. Wow. Out of our water table. 1 billion gallons a month. And so you have these really left-wing groups like Trout Unlimited. They're against these high-capacity wells, Trout Unlimited. Why are they against them? Because they're sucking dry the great trout streams of Wisconsin. And if you're lucky enough to have a cottage on a nice lake up north in Wisconsin and it's right on the water's edge, it's no longer on the water's edge on a lot of these lakes because the lake has receded by hundreds of yards because of the factory farms that are just hogging all the water. So, yeah, and a lot of them are hog farms, 6,000 hog farms. I was up in Ashland, as I said, and they've got an Iowa company that wants to come in and have 6,000 hogs on a factory farm within spitting distance of Lake Superior, practically. And they've been able to stop it so far, but what worries me is that the jokers in the Capitol are going to say, in their fight against local control, and it used to be the Republicans loved local control, they hate local control now. They passed more than 100 bills that are restricting local control. What I worry about is they're going to tell counties and cities that you can no longer zone against factory farms. So maybe we shouldn't be broadcasting that possibility if they haven't thought of it yet. Forget about it. You didn't hear about it here. So Walker's also letting companies buy up and drain wetlands. I'm a bird watcher. This is a great time right now to see the birds coming through, and not just the beautiful orioles and grosbeaks and tanagers and warblers that are going to be here in a week. They'd be here today if there was a south wind, but also the tremendous shorebirds, the avocets and black-necked stilts and sandpipers that come through. And the white pelicans and all that. So, you know, the wetlands are really important. I'm wondering whether Ducks Unlimited is going to come out against Walker at some point because they're drying up the wetlands that help the puddle ducks. So, and this, most shocking of all, it's not even funding our state parks. They're not funding our state parks. Really? The great state parks, I mean, you think of, I think as a bird watcher of Wyalusing State Park or Peninsula State Park up in Door County. Just tremendous, tremendous common property of the people of Wisconsin. And he's not investing it. In fact, there's a frac sand mine that got approval right next to Wyalusing State Park just a year or two ago. And when you go there, you can see the train. You hear the train go by with taking the sand away. Scott Walker, let's be clear, Scott Walker is an enemy of the environment. Scott Walker is an enemy of the earth. I think there's no other way to say it. And so
badge or not, the scout badge.
What?
Did they get a scouting badge or not?
Oh, I don't know. He's an Eagle Scout, he told us, but I don't know. He wouldn't pass that now, I don't think. So should return that badge. So that's Walker. And then we come to Donald Trump, who said in 2013 and 2014, this is a direct quote, global warming is a total and very expensive hoax. He then denied that he said it was hoax, but there's plenty of film and record of him saying that global warming is a total hoax. And he's acted as though it's a total hoax because, of course, who has he appointed to head the EPA but Scott Pruitt, who is a climate denier. And Scott Pruitt right away then hired people who are also climate deniers in the higher reaches of the EPA. Some of them from Senator Inhofe's staff, who has made a career of being a buffoon on the issue of climate change. And then Trump's EPA has rolled back a lot of the Obama good things that happened as far as the environment, with restricting the government's ability to prevent water pollution and collect data on methane emissions. That's gone. Late in March, Trump signed an executive order that seeks to dismantle much of the work on climate change that Obama did. The order downplays the future costs of carbon emissions, rescinds a 2016 moratorium on coal leases on federal lands. It struck down the Obama order to prepare for climate change's worst impacts, and get this, including on national security, because the Pentagon and the CIA, they're really worried about climate change. They know it exists. They know it's going to create tremendous disruptions around the world. It could create problems for us at a foreign policy level and at a national security level. And so they want to not only study climate change for that reason, they want to roll back climate change because they don't want the disruptions and the problems that stem from the disruptions of climate change. But Trump has got his head in the sand on this. And then he rescinded the EPA's Clean Power Plan in his hopeless effort to revive the coal industry. Even the utilities are ahead of Donald Trump on climate change. And then just yesterday, Donald Trump signed an executive order expanding offshore oil drilling. He's proposed a 24% cut at the EPA, $2 billion out of the EPA's budget. The Office of Research is cut by 50% at the EPA. And the EPA's new overseers eliminated the word science from the mission statement of its Office of Science and Technology Policy. Okay. And federal climate studies are being tossed aside, and references to climate change have been scrubbed from some federal websites. Does that sound familiar? It sounds just like what Scott Walker did right here with the DNR. And so, you know, funding for all sorts of things like restoring the Great Lakes, something that's important here in Wisconsin, restoring Chesapeake Bay, restoring Puget Sound, restoring San Francisco Bay, almost all that has gone by the wayside. It's open season at the EPA. And it's not just the EPA that's taking the anti-science blows. Trump has also called for double-digit cuts to the National Institutes of Health, if you can believe that. NIH. My wife's just retired after 40 years as a nurse, as a public health nurse, and the idea that you're going to cut the budget of the National Institutes of Health is disastrous as far as our ability to protect the public health, to research infectious diseases, to come up with cures. It could mean that the NIH will be unable to issue any new research grants starting in 2018. So you got to ask yourself, and I did as I was just trying to think of what to try to talk about today, why? Why are they doing this? Why are they waging this war on science and on the environment? Why are they so brazenly indifferent to the consequences of their actions? And so in thinking about it, I could come up with 3 reasons. I'm sure you could come up with others, but hear me out here for a second. First, I just frankly don't think they care. I don't think they care. And why don't they care? Because it's not them that's going to do the suffering. And while, yes, there is no planet B, and that sign is correct, there's no planet B, the super rich like Donald Trump and his billionaire friends, you know, they're living on a different planet A than you and I are. And similarly, those who serve Donald Trump, you know, the Scott Fitzgeralds and Scott Walkers of this world, they won't be the ones who suffer on planet A because they'll be well rewarded for carrying the water for the Koch brothers and ExxonMobil. All of them can retreat at some point to their gated communities on higher ground. You know, it's not their kids, it's not their grandkids that are going to be swept out to sea like millions of kids are going to be in Bangladesh. It's just not going to happen to them. It's not going to happen to their lives. They're not going to be impacted to the extent that other people are going to be impacted by climate change. You know, Ivanka and Jared are going to be just fine. I'm not worried about them. The second reason is, you know, sometimes people believe what's comfortable for them to believe. And I think it was Upton Sinclair said, you know, had a great quote about that. It depends on who's signing your check. That's what you're going to believe, or what's convenient for you to believe. Where you sit is where you stand. So a lot, maybe Walker and Trump and Voss and Fitzgerald, you know, maybe, you know, they believe the crap that's been well paid for. And it has been well paid for. The Koch brothers themselves, who are oil and gas refiners and pipeline owners, spent $100 million over the last 20 years to fund 84 groups that have been peddling this climate denial crap. ExxonMobil itself, one of the biggest polluters in the world, spent $30 million in the same period doing the same thing. Even when its own scientists inside ExxonMobil were warning the company about the consequences of all this fossil fuel burning. And now we have, of course, the head of ExxonMobil as our Secretary of State. I mean, it was laughable to me when it was even floated that the head of ExxonMobil is going to be our Secretary of State of the United States. There was a wise man in the 19th century who said the executive branch is but the executive committee of the ruling class. And then when you have a guy who's head of ExxonMobil running the whole show here for the State Department, our foreign policy, it seems like that statement has been validated. So they're buying their own propaganda. They're eating their own crap, if you will, if you want to be blunt about it. Third, and this is an important thing, because they not only buy this, they propagate this. And this is the ideology that idolizes the private sector. This is the ideological problem that we face, not just with global climate change, but with the environment, with regulating corporate abuses, with tax policy, I mean, with public schools. And so what is this ideology at its most basic? It says that everything private is good, everything public is bad. Government bad, business good. It's really not much more sophisticated than that. It's really, really crude, actually. And that's what we're up against at a level of people's thought processes. And we need to combat that, to triumph over Donald Trump and Scott Walker, to do something serious about climate change that is going to have some effect on our planet. We need to triumph over this ideology or we're lost. Really, this is the main battle on the ideological playing field. We need to reassert the values of the common good, or the commonwealth, or the public. Because, you know, these guys, they don't need the public. They don't need a state park. Billionaires can buy parks and do buy parks all their own. They don't need that. They don't need public schools. They send their kids to the best private schools in the country or in the world. You know, they don't need a public library. They can buy any single book or hundreds and thousands of books if they want, and all the computers that they want. They don't need to go to the public library. I'm sure Ivanka and Jared haven't been to a public library in their lives. You know, they don't need the public. And so they disdain the public and underfund the public then, and then blame government as though government is the problem, when in actual fact government is the only institution, at least formally, that we can have some democratic power over. Because right now in the private sector, there are only 8% of people in Wisconsin who are unionized. So the other 92% of the people in Wisconsin, from 9 to 5, are essentially working in dictatorships. And we're supposed to love democracy here in this country. So we really need to address this question of ideology and the making of a golden calf out of, you know, the private sector. And so that's some of the work that I try to do when I go around and talk. And there are a lot of us working on this messaging issue. I've been working with the Wisconsin Council on Children and Families, a tremendous group that works on budget issues and poverty issues and race issues. I've been working with the folks over at Citizen Action on messaging and how to address this really insidious doctrine that somehow government is the problem. I mean, Ronald Reagan was the one who brought this forward first, but again, this was a conservative strategy. And you've got to give these folks credit on the right, because they were more strategic, they were more systematic, they were more methodical. Of course, they were more well-funded than we were over the last 40 or 50 years. I mean, it was Justice Powell before he got on the U.S. Supreme Court, who was the chief counsel for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, who said in the early 1970s to the business community, you're getting beat up here in the ideological area and in the media. You got to set up your own think tanks and your own media or you're going to get beat. So what did they do? They set up, the American Enterprise Institute or the Heritage Foundation, and then it came to Fox News, a whole station and a network. And the righties love to talk about how the media is left-wing and Hollywood is left-wing. There's no analogous network on the left compared to the right-wing stuff that comes out of Fox News. And some people are just on a IV drip 24/7 from Fox News, and it's no wonder they don't know what's going on really in the world, or they have a distorted view of what's happening. But I like to look at what the good news is, because there is good news. And the good news is that there has been a lot of organizing, good organizing going on. Even before Trump came in, there was the fight for the $15 an hour thing. I mean, if you had told me, for instance, 10 years ago that people were walking out en masse from McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's demanding $15 an hour, I would have told you were crazy. If you would have told me that gay marriage would have been the law of the land in 50 states in the United States, told me that 20 years ago, I would have thought you were nuts. And if you told me we would have had a black president 20 years ago, I would have told you were crazy. So it's not like we haven't gotten anywhere. And the great nonviolent revolution of the last 50 years was gay and lesbian rights that was successfully gained without a bullet being fired here in the United States because people addressed the distortions in everybody else's, in the minds of their family and their friends and their neighbors. And so we need to address the distortions in the minds of our family, friends, and neighbors when it comes to this, all government bad, all business good. There's no such thing as the public or the common that we need to protect. So that was happening before, and the Black Lives Matter movement happened before Trump, and that was a good thing. There have been a lot of things that happened since Trump, just in the last few months. First day in office, the Women's March was incredible. My wife was in Washington for it and said it was really inspiring. I was in Madison on State Street. I couldn't move. There were 75,000 of us. I was stuck right outside the University Bookstore, and everybody started to yell after an hour, can we start marching yet? I mean, it was claustrophobic there, but there are also tremendous signs there and tremendous chants. And that's one of the great things about these mass protests, just how creative people are and how festive it is. Young women were chanting, "We don't want your little hands anywhere near our underpants," and stuff like that. It was funny, and it was just great to be there. It was inspiring to be there. The pro-immigration marches have been tremendous since Trump came in. There's going to be a huge one on May 1st here on Monday. In Milwaukee, there's a giant one, and in Madison too. And then, I was really worried at the beginning, and I still have half a worry, that Trump is a crypto-fascist. And that, because he was been playing footsie with Bannon, who is an actual fascist, and is right there in the Oval, right there, the next door to the Oval Office. Let's be clear about that. And so I studied fascism I studied it in college, and then I studied it when I was at the Progressive, and then I reviewed my studies when Trump won, which was a shocker. Though I wasn't totally shocked. I was worried he was going to win, because I knew people who were voting for him. They weren't evil people. They weren't people who have Nazi flags out front or have a Confederate flag on their bumper sticker. Though there are those people in Wisconsin. I had 10 miles from our house, south of Madison, there was someone who had an American flag on the back of their pickup truck on one side and a Confederate flag on the other. And you may have seen the photo on Facebook this winter of the house in Oshkosh that had a literal Nazi flag flying out, red and black with a big swastika on it. So there are those folks out there, but we need to be clear that not everyone who voted for Donald Trump, not even a majority of the people who voted for Donald Trump are that far right, are fascists and racists. You know, I know a lot of people who voted for him who are really decent people. And they didn't like the alternative. They wanted to shake things up. They were sick of the status quo. And Hillary Clinton didn't run the greatest campaign in the world. I mean, let's face that too. So we need, though, to respond to the possibility that things can go really right-wing. So I studied these fascism books, and I can commend to you a book called The Anatomy of Fascism by Robert Paxton, P-A-X-T-O-N. And the thing about Germany and Italy was that the civil society did not respond. People essentially rolled over. That's what the book says. And people didn't roll over when Trump came in. Not only were there these protests, but other aspects of civil society have held. And we should recognize that and applaud that. The judges who have stood up to one unconstitutional order after another from Trump. That has been a really healthy sign. The media, some segments of the media have stood up and not taken the nonsense that has been coming down from Trump. Some of the cities, sanctuary cities, have stood up and said, you know, we're not going to play along with your anti-immigrant policies. And it's not just the Muslim ban either, because a lot of people focused on that and how horrendous that was, and judges twice have thrown that out now. But also there was an executive order prior to the Muslim ban, and this is still on the books. And this is what it says, that the Immigration Service, ICE, can deport anybody who has not only committed a crime, but who has been arrested for a crime, not yet convicted, not yet tried and convicted, and anyone who is, what is the word, not even arrested yet, but capable of committing a crime. That's how it is. And so it's in this executive order, and it really lets any law enforcement person arrest essentially anybody and say, you know, I think you're going to commit a crime, so you got to get out of here. And so a lot of people in the immigrant rights community have been rising up about that, and that's necessary. And so I think that's a good sign. I also think that the peace movement is going to revive. I mean, here we have a president who tweets about what was the adjective he used for the war against Korea that might come? Anyway, some big war against Korea. What was it? Major war. Major is out of Catch-22. There was this character in Catch-22 named Major. I don't think Trump read the book. But anyway, the idea that you're tweeting about a nuclear war, major nuclear war, is horrifying. And he also has been bombing more than Obama bombed, and Obama bombed 5 times as much as George H.W. Bush bombed. And so as peace activists, and especially the folks in the Fellowship of Reconciliation, we got to recognize that we have a major peace and war problem on our hands with this man. And no one wins a nuclear war. I mean, the whole Korean Peninsula would be destroyed, and then we might get nuclear winter on top of it. So the idea that everything is on the table, you know, Tillerson likes to say everything's on the table. Even Democrats who've been running for president have said everything is on the table. That means nuclear weapons are on the table. That means nuclear war is on the table. Do we really want nuclear war on the table? Do we really want our nuclear weapons to be on hair trigger alert 40 years after the fall of the Soviet Union, or 30 years after the fall of the Soviet Union? I mean, don't you think the President of the United States should sleep on it before he blows up the world? It's an idea. Right now, those weapons could be launched within 15 minutes. So people are rising up. There's this group that came out of nowhere called Indivisible, indivisible.com. They're indivisible groups. I spoke to an indivisible group in Jefferson just about 2 weeks ago. People are doing tremendous organizing when their local elected officials are having town halls or even office hours. They go and give them a piece of their mind. And that's how it should be. That's what democracy is supposed to be, a little accountability for a change. So I take heart at that. Even some of the utilities, as I mentioned, you know, the utilities are wiser about climate change than Walker is. They know that coal is not only dirty, but from a capitalist standpoint, it's expensive. And so they're looking for cheaper sources. The Pentagon isn't gung-ho on a lot of the stuff that Walker wants to do, so that's probably a good thing. China is leading more than we are right now, even though it's polluting more than we are right now. It's the leading manufacturer of solar panels, for sure. They have higher fuel efficiency standards on their cars than we do. I also take heart in the fact that no one is in power forever. I mean, we're in the middle of a counter-revolution here in Wisconsin. We've been in the middle of it since 2010. It seems like it's going to be here forever. And we are at the start of a counter-revolution in Washington now with Trump. But I think we need to take the historical view, which is accurate, that no one is in power forever. I beg your pardon?
Unless he ends the world.
Oh, unless he ends the world, but then he won't be in power either. But we won't be around to relish the fact that he's not in power anymore. But so I went back and read this poem, a famous poem, Ozymandias by Shelley in the 19th century, where he talks about this great dictator. And there was someone had been out in Asia and came back and reported on there was this statue of this great dictator, but the head had fallen off. And the head is in the sand, and all that's left is the legs and the decapitated head. But there was an inscription that remained, and it was the dictator bragging. And the visitor who had seen it said that the dictator had the sneer of cold command still on his decapitated face. And Trump has that sneer. I mean, he has that sneer of the bully. And really the essence of progressive politics is to fight the bully, to stand up to the bully, no matter what the issue is, whether it's the bully who's the boss or the bully who's the sexual harasser. It's just across the board. It's the bully who's polluting our environment. We've got to stand up to the bully. So Trump has that sneer of cold command. Walker is more like the smirk of cold command. You know, he doesn't really sneer. He doesn't project that kind of power. And when he was on the stage with the other candidates for the nomination to be president, he didn't even cast a shadow under all those lights that were up there. So, and then there's this verse from the poem, Ozymandias. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. So, you know, Walker will be a colossal wreck someday. Trump will be a colossal wreck. But we, and generations behind us fighting to protect the earth, we will stretch like the sands. I'm confident that we will. But we're not going to get there on facts and reason and science alone. And I think we need to understand that even as we protest the lack of respect for facts and science and reason during these Earth Day celebrations, because we need to get to people at a different level. We need to get to people at the level of their values. Because if we could win on facts alone, we would have won a long time ago. But somehow we haven't been winning people at their values levels. And so we need to appeal to people at their highest values, their highest desires, their highest wishes. And I don't believe those highest wishes are just to be out alone as an isolated individual. You know, this don't tread on me slogan, I don't think that is really the epitome of freedom. I think there are other definitions of freedom. Yes, there's the freedom enshrined in the Bill of Rights, and we need those freedoms of speech and assembly, for instance, and privacy. But there's also the freedom, I mean, how free are you if you don't have a job? Are you really free? Can you do what you want in the world if you don't have a job, or you don't have any money? If you don't have a house, you don't have a place to stay? How free are you if you don't have health care and then you get sick? That's not really freedom. So we need to talk to people about what real freedom is, and what real justice is, and what real democracy is. I mean, we don't have a democracy in this country. Jimmy Carter said it a couple years ago. We have a oligarchy with unlimited political bribery. And day in and day out at the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, you know, we uncover the bribery, and we list the bribers and the bribees. And so we need to appeal to people. People like democracy, and they like freedom, and they like justice, and they believe in kindness, and they believe actually in the earth. They want to trout fish. in a beautiful stream. They want to go camping at Devil's Lake or Wyalusing or Peninsula State Park. They can't buy their own parks like the billionaires can. So we really need to appeal to people. So I'm confident we're going to win this fight. We will win this fight. It is the fight of our lives. It's this fight for, our sacred earth. Nothing more, nothing less than a fight for our sacred earth. But it's not for ourselves alone. It's for ourselves and, as they say, our posterity. I just want to end with this Howard Zinn quote, and I'm going to amend the quote too. At the bottom there, on this sheet that I handed out, and if you didn't get one, I've got more. To live now as we think human beings should live, in defiance of all that is bad around us, is itself a marvelous victory, and I really believe in that. But I would just say, to live now as we think human beings should live, in defiance of all that is bad around us, and in celebration of all that is good around us, is itself a marvelous victory. Thank you.